and welcome to another episode of the CEO Pick. I am Dave Osh, the CEO of Varlinks that sponsors this show. We partner with executive teams to create transformative change in high complexity. Our purpose is to evolve leadership effectiveness so that together we create a ripple effect of unity in the world. The CEO Pick Show is devoted to sharing the thought leadership of successful leaders of mid-sized companies. Such a leader is our guest today, Scott Francis, the co-founder and CEO of BP3. BP3 is an award-winning automation provider with offices in Austin, Denver, London, Amsterdam, and Lisbon. BP3 helps streamline and automate processes that drive everything from customer experience to employee productivity in some of the world's most respected brands such as Lilly, Charter, Wells Fargo, and others. Scott co-founded BP3 in 2007. He served as the CTO for the first 4 years, and 5 years ago, he transitioned into the CEO role, succeeding his co-founder Les Gibbs. Scott also serves as the president of the Magellan International School Board. This is an IB school with immersion Spanish and Mandarin where Scott's 6 and 9 years old kids go. So hello, Scott, and welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Dave, for having me. Really looking forward to this conversation.
I'm so excited to host you on one hand, but on the other hand, I'm very frustrated that we are not going to talk about automation processes, which is my second favorite after leadership.
Right. We might have to do that in a separate call then. I'm pretty sure we could geek out on processes for an hour or two. So.
Oh, more than that. So let's start. I like to start with a topic that's really close to your heart, talent. And so let's start with where do you find your talent for BP3 and what's your philosophy about hiring?
Well, I think, for us, when we started BP3, part of our thesis was we kind of knew where, we used to use the expression, we knew where all the bodies were buried, right? Which is not really true. We just knew where they were hiding. We knew where all this great talent was because we had been doing work around the process space for a long time. And we felt like if we put the right company together, that we would be able to attract that talent to BP3. So we of course started with people we had worked with before, that we worked with at various other companies or places, or met each other because we were both contracting into the same company, things like that. So you just kind of collect your network over many years, right? Your whole career, really. And that's a great place to start, I think. When you're putting a company together, start with some people you trust, that you know you can ride the river with. Maybe you've been through a tough project before, and you know that when they had the opportunity to throw you under the bus, they didn't, that they helped instead, and vice versa, right? You've got each other's back. That's a great place to start. But then I think you have to go beyond that, right? You have to build a company, that can grow and evolve and build its own talent base, if you will. And our position about where to find that talent evolved over time. We started very early on hiring some folks out of college, and I think always a good strategy is wherever you're based, look at your local university, community college, higher educational institutions, right? And look for those opportunities. That's a great place to start as far as finding fresh talent that's hungry for a job, hungry to prove themselves, and a great way to sort of mold their personality, their professional personality into your culture. But eventually you go beyond that, right? And so we looked at universities that were quite strong, like Rose-Hulman, for example, which is in Southeast Indiana. And part of our thesis was, if I were in Southeast Indiana, I might look at Austin as a big upgrade, for where to live next. And, so we sort of thought about where there were some good schools in places where you might not want to stay afterward. You might be for your job opportunities and things like that. Not because Terre Haute isn't a lovely town, and it is. In fact, many years ago, my family was from Terre Haute, so I have nothing against it. But it's a small town, right? And Austin is a city, metro area of more than 2 million people. And so there's a difference in terms of opportunity between those places. The winters are a little bit milder in Austin as well, although you might not know it this week. It's going to be quite cold here. so we branched out to a university where we could attract people down. And, I graduated from Stanford, and, I think you just have to be smart and realize that, going to Stanford to recruit to our company was not a realistic path to find the right kind of talent for us. That they would be, too expensive for what we could pay, and just not the right fit and profile. So you have to be realistic as well about your talent profile. I think the other, the other thing we started looking at as we realized, in our work profile, uh, that a lot of the work we were doing was JavaScript, right? Writing JavaScript, understand the business and write JavaScript. And the harder part to teach people was understanding the business and having that sort of emotional maturity to do consulting for a client, to really understand where they're coming from, where they're at, how their business works, and how to resolve the challenges for them. And then that was the harder skill to teach. So we also started looking at coding boot camps where people had had a previous career and then decided they really wanted to learn how to write code and dropped their previous job, took 12 weeks out or more to learn how to code. Those turn out to be pretty interesting fits for our business as well. Uh, and I'm not saying every person who goes through boot camp is a good fit for us, but we have found some of our best employees have come out of those kinds of programs. And my hypothesis for that is that they are mature people, they've had a professional experience, good, bad, or indifferent. They have already made a decision to change their career and go down a different path. And then we help them pursue that path, right? We become their champion and they're the wind at their backs. And one risk when you hire out of college that I think everybody's aware of, at least in the back of their mind, is a couple of years out of college, we all sort of second guess, is this the career I want? Should I do something different? You have that moment of maybe reevaluating your career path. And if you catch someone 5 years out that has already done that, right, you've kind of skipped one step in evolution. And you get someone who has more life experience and potentially more empathy, for the customer. But I think if we hire them directly out of college, that is the kind of thing we focus on. Really, is that the empathy and maturity and self-awareness. We don't always succeed in our filter, right? But I think we do a pretty good job of selecting for those qualities, and we focus a lot more on that than we do on can they write the right line of code, you know, can they answer all the brain teasers and things like that, right? So it's been an interesting evolution in terms of how we find talent. And I'm focusing on more the ground up. Obviously, we have to also go out and hire, your executive team, your, leadership in various roles. So you also have to balance the hiring talent from the bottom up with also hiring some folks who bring a lot of experience and know-how to the company as well.
Yeah. And sometimes we think that the most experienced are plug and play. And this is like the balance between plug and play and, we need to invest so much in their development. And I learned that there's nothing like plug and play. It's a myth.
Yeah.
You need to spend on development, both of mature or less mature employees. So what's your thoughts about how to balance that? What companies needs to go with invest more in development rather than this plug and play or more mature employees?
Well, I think one big element that I rarely hear people talk about is your growth rate or your expected growth rate. If you are, a rocket ship shooting for the moon and you're growing well north of 100% a year, you really need to think about hiring people who know how to execute that function in your business the day you hire them. Right. You can also look for culture fit and, making sure you're hiring someone that as best you can fits with your company culture. But you really have to look for that prior experience. Like I have set up 3 call centers before that went from 10 people to 1,000 people. And you are the 4th one that I'm setting up, right? Like you can find those people, right? Who know I know how to set up the call center and scale it. If you're growing 10% a year, 20% a year, you don't have to hire the guy who has scaled a call center from 10 people to 1,000. You can hire someone who has run a call center before or been in a call center before and managed a small team within it. And you can expect to invest in that person and grow them over time. And so I think that growth rate is a critical aspect because it dictates how much you can expect for someone you hire to learn within your company and develop as part of your company versus someone who has to come in with a lot of innate knowledge already, right? I have 10 years of experience doing this thing. I'm going to give you year 11 and 13, right? And I think one of the challenges with hiring those sort of plug and play folks in fast growing companies is they often don't have all the cultural fit that you want, or they don't fully buy into your culture. They have a strong view of how to build their own team's culture that may be contrary to the rest of your company. So it's a cautionary element. But if you're taking your rocket ship to the moon, you can't afford to take too long to think about it. You've got to really, press hard and execute.
Yeah, since you shifted to culture, I'd like to ask, how do you develop culture in BP3?
I think some of it happens organically. It's just who you are and how that gets expressed within your team. And I would say that the biggest developers of culture are really the team members, not the executives, right? So I'd like to say, oh, the culture comes from me. But I think as a founder, it's much easier for me to undermine and destroy the culture than it is for me to create it, if you will. And so there's a lot of things I can do wrong to, do real damage to our culture. But what I can do is reinforce things that are going well. I can reinforce those behaviors. I can tell people what I love about our culture and cheerlead for it. And we can, criticize and have consequences for behavior that doesn't fit our culture. And, you have to use all of those tools carefully as CEO, but you can also encourage and really cultivate your culture carriers, right? The folks that are really champions for your culture, so that some of that cultural reinforcement doesn't have to come from the boss, right? It can come from other people in the organization. And, so at BP3, for example, we have a culture that's a very flat hierarchy in our culture. Our culture is such that anyone can talk to anyone, right? We don't have any, well, you have to talk to your boss and then they talk to their boss and then put you in touch, two team members on the team to talk. You just go direct. And that is true from anyone in our company can talk to our VP of sales about their account and say, hey, do we have the sales opportunity, right, at this customer? Likewise, our sales VP, I would expect she can reach out to anyone on our team to ask for their help without asking permission first. Now we have to be careful with that power, right? There's responsibility with that, but we want that open culture. And when we interview people, sometimes you'll get folks who interview with us, and what they want to know is what's the career path, what's the career ladder, right? And this anecdote really goes towards something I believe, which is if you define your culture, you have to also define it with enough edge, hard boundaries, if you will, that someone can choose to be in the box or choose to be out of the box, right? Yeah, give them a chance to choose. And if it's impossible for someone to choose, then you don't really have a conviction around your culture, right? A sort of edge to it. And the example I was going to give is, our culture being relatively flat. When we interview someone and they're very concerned about the ladder, how do I get to the next promotion? How long does it normally take to get promoted? What are the promotional levels? Like how many levels do you have? And who will I report to? And then who do they report to? And how many levels below the CEO am I? Right. Those kinds of questions lead us to believe someone is playing a sort of role-playing game where you develop your strength, your charisma, and your intelligence, and you work on your character attributes and power up, level up. But that's not how BP3 works. And I think for someone who has that sort of mode of thinking, they want to apply to a really big company that has a very formalized plan, an IBM, a Google, a Facebook, where all of that leveling is well defined. For a company that has 10,000 employees or more, at BP3, what I'll tell those folks is we're very honest with them about we don't have a career ladder like that. What we care about is the respect for our customers and our teammates and making our customers successful and making and meeting our commitments to. And that's how we measure success here, not how many people report to you or how high up the rung you are, or precisely what your salary is or how many stock options you have, things like that. That's not how we're measuring success. And that's not the right fit for everybody, right? But I think if we're very straight with people about that's what our culture is, then they can choose, yeah, actually, that sounds more like what I want. Or they might choose, actually, that's not what I want. I want a more defined path. I want to know how the game works so I can win it. And at BP3, the game is less defined, right? It is, what customers you get assigned to will greatly affect, your paths at BP3. And we try to move people around so that they're on a team working with someone then they're on a smaller team, then a bigger team, then maybe a 2-person project leading the project, then maybe a project all on their own. So you try and mix up how big the teams are and their role within them so that when they do have a chance to lead a team, they're really ready to do it. And that takes some, it's not always obvious to people on our team that we're bouncing them around for a reason. It feels like a random walk. And then at some point they get an assignment like run this 4-person team, and they realize because they've had these different experiences, they're ready to run that 4-person team.
It's so outdated to have the development based on titles.
Right.
Or see the career development rather than professional development or leadership development and so many other ways of development rather than just creating kind of a fictitious hierarchy of many, many ranks, right?
Right. Especially if you're a company with less than 200 employees, it just doesn't make sense to have these sort of, convoluted hierarchical schemes, right? You want to really just focus on impact on the business.
So how do you develop the organization in terms of the other measures that you have beyond just the professional or JavaScript? What other levels of development that you have in an organization?
Give me an example, Dave. What do you mean in terms of the other levels?
It means that, for example, when you talk about people that just take a leadership role within a team, how do they develop their leadership to take such a role without a title, just like as a team leader?
Well, part of it, I think, we have obviously a very distributed company just by the nature of what we do, right? As a services firm, we work with clients all over the US and Europe. And we spend a lot of time in normal years, we spend a lot of time traveling to visit those clients. And so you are sort of by nature untethered from the mothership, and you have to be able to make your own decisions. And so there are a few things that we try to do. And one is to make sure that we kind of show everybody on the team what the compass looks like. So instead of giving you all the directions, the recipe, we try to make sure everybody's compass points north, right? We all know which way north is. If north is happy, successful customer, what are all the things I could do to go north, right? And it's easier to make decisions if ultimately that's the goal. And I can make some trade-offs, one way or the other, but I'm going that direction. It's easier for people to focus, whether they're leading or following on the right things. So the other thing we do is try to put people in a position without worrying about leadership per se. You put them in a position where they have to make decisions. So, a big part of leadership is making decision and then living with it and the consequences of it, good or bad, right? And when you are on a small team, right, that accountability is really large. When you're on a larger team, it's more diffuse, right? You can make a mistake, someone else might cover it for you or fix it for you. And so our first project for our consultants, we try to put them in a smaller team if we can. 2 people working side by side with someone, kind of journeyman apprentice kind of mode. And I think that's been incredibly effective for us. On a bigger team, we still try to pair them with somebody so they know who to go to at all times rather than get lost on a bigger team. But then we try to mix it up. Okay, now put you on a bigger team and you have to fend for yourself a little bit. It's not obvious who you're tag teamed with, but I think it's putting them in the stress of those situations really helps. Then you put them in one where they're solo. It's all on you to deliver. You can ask for help. We're here to help you, right? But nobody else is writing the code for you. Nobody else is figuring out what code we should write, right? You have to figure out what we should be doing. And the customer will help you, obviously, and so will we, but you're the person in the seat. So you're in the command chair, make the decisions. And then the most interesting moment is when they have someone working for them. And what I love to do, it doesn't always work out this way, but I love to have somebody leading a project with a more experienced person as their wingman. And, that's really a kind of awesome experience for people because you have this person on your right hand who, has done this all before and could do it for you, right? Like they could lead, but they're letting you do it, right? And they're a resource for you and a sounding board, and they're helping you. But what you don't have to worry about is will they deliver, right? I know I can count on this person, and it really teaches you the value of having a team you can rely on and count on. And I think sets you up a little bit better for then when you have to run a team that's 3 or 4 people, right? Maybe not everyone is that Mr. Reliable, Mrs. Reliable that you can really rely on. You have to, put a little work into it because you're not sure. When they say yes, they can get it done by Friday. Do they really mean it will be done on Friday, or they mean it will be kind of done on Friday, but more likely Monday or Tuesday, right? Like those are things you have to know about your team over time, right? Um, and then the other thing we do the other developmental thing we do in terms of assignments, after someone's led a project, we like to put them in a position where they're not leading a project. Take a step back and work for somebody else on their project to regain some perspective of what it's like to be, sort of following someone else's lead, helping them, assisting them. And I think it really builds the team spirit and camaraderie. Those are the kinds of things we do in terms of assigning our team members to work within our organization. And I have to admit, a lot of it is we have to react to what we sign, right? Like the kinds of customers we sign up, the projects we sign. So a lot of that is victim of circumstance as well. But there are other things we do to try to help people understand our leadership style. And some of that structure is, every month we do company-wide video call, and go over what we've done that month, the numbers, the call outs, the kudos, the things that went wrong, things we're trying, right? So we try to be transparent to cultivate that culture within the company and within our teams. We also have a program that people can sign up for where we'll do an online course, for example, on leadership, and use Coursera or one of those online resources. But we do it as a team. So every Friday, you're getting together Friday mornings to discuss the results, how that went. And I think it's that discussion. To me, it kind of reminds me of, in college, you would take a course, you go to lecture, and then you would have a section where you get together with a group, 10 to 15 other students to discuss the material. And I would say for most people in my classes in college, they learned more out of those section gatherings than they did out of the lectures, because they might sort of tune out, you drift, you miss a few things during the lecture, but the discussion and the disagreement with people sitting at the same table with you that right? And you're having this like, no, that's not what I got out of it. I got this other thing. And, you could have some really good conversations out of that I think generate a lot more learning and help it stick. So I think it's also helped people understand some of what we're doing, right? That they probably just think, I guess Scott just likes to have these monthly meetings, or, like, I think some of the things you do as a company, people who come in new might not realize that there's thought behind it, but it's a designed behavior, not a happenstance behavior. So I think it's good for them to see that, some examples of structured approaches to leadership. And then they can see, well, we don't do everything that's in the class, but we do some of those things. And maybe it's intentional.
I love the different versions that you have of leadership, that sometimes a young person actually lead somebody else, which is more experienced. Remind me of the Air Force.
Yeah.
I flew jets for the Air Force, and many times my commanders flew as my wingman. Right. And it was very stressful, but we knew that I have a great wingman, very experienced, right?
Yeah.
But sometimes I remember every time that my commanders were and sometimes generals came and flew as my wingmen. It was very stressful. I need to show off, need to be on my best, and so on and so forth.
Right. So, I have to say, my first job out of college, I was given the opportunity to run a project, and my wingman was 10 years my senior, roughly. And he seemed much older than that to me, because I was about 23 and he was probably 30, right? But he seemed way older than that to me at the time. And if he watches this, he'll love hearing that. But I learned so much from him running that project, and having him asking me questions about why I was doing things a certain way or what I was thinking about. And he wasn't asking to be critical. He was just helping me think through it and helping himself understand how I work and how I think. And it was immensely valuable for my career development. And at BP3, we have another gentleman, of that age, if you will, experience, I've worked with, over the course of 25 years. And he is like the new hire whisperer, right? We pair him up with our college hires one at a time, and they love working with him because he's so good at teasing out, your thought process and really helping you reinforce what you're doing. That, people like that are really like gold, right? When they're good at apprenticing, young hires. So
yeah, developing like mentorship relationship with the
right. Absolutely.
Yeah, Scott, I think that we got to the end of our time, and I have so many other questions to ask you. Just a quick one. I cannot hold myself.
Yeah.
Just
Okay.
about, because you actually, as the founder, you started as a CTO and transitioned to the CEO. Just a few words about this transition. How was it?
Yeah. Well, I think first of all, I was thinking about this the other day because we passed the baton in 2016, but I was running the company effectively before that, right? I was CTO. I used to joke it was chief therapy officer. You spend more time talking about people than you do about technology, and which was true. I wasn't writing code anymore. I was helping people think through their decisions and making decisions about running the business. And I had my co-founder Lance supporting me all the way. And I knew when I made a decision, I already knew if Lance would support it or not. But I also knew that I could check with Lance and he would tell me, yeah, no, that's totally the right, let's do that. Or, occasionally he'd say, well, have you thought about this other thing? We talk it through and then we'd go forward. The thing that I didn't realize, right? So it wasn't the decision making itself that changed, but what I didn't realize is how much I had outsourced the stress of those decisions to Lance, right? In other words, I made the decision, but I knew Lance was in the chair, right? And I knew he would support my decision, but he's still in the chair, and and that meant at some level he was responsible for my decisions, at some level. And I didn't really consciously think about that until I was in the chair, and I could still talk to Lance, but it didn't take the stress away in the way that it did before, right? Because now it was really my decision anyway, right? And I was sitting in the chair, so it was an interesting difference in just how you perceive that decision making and owning the consequences of your decisions. And I don't know that it meant that we necessarily made different decisions, but it really was a fascinating, just sort of how my psychology adjusted as a result of going through that change. And I have to say, Lance was very gracious in sort of passing the torch to me to run the company at a time when things are going well, not setting us up for oh, there's a crisis coming here, Scott. He did a great job of helping me, take the lead in the company and really get settled in well. So it's been, both roles are gratifying, and I would say, for a lot of people, if you're in that second chair, right, you're the right hand person supporting your boss, your CEO, leader of your organization. That is a role where a lot of times people feel like they just desperately want to make that next jump. But that role is so critical for organizations to have that strong right hand. And there's so many organizations who don't have that. And I always feel bad when I talk to leaders who don't feel like they have that person they can 100% lean on and depend on, because it really makes everything work better in the organization. And I think there are a lot of CEOs that, frankly, are also really good at being that right hand, right? That person who can take care of everything that gets assigned to them and support their boss, right? So it's an interesting. I think those two roles in a company are so critical, and I guess I've enjoyed both of them. Maybe that's why I'm biased, that I like them.
I absolutely agree. The best question I was ever asked was, who is your number two? And that was changed my life, because they're always developing the succession and so on. So, Scott, thank you so much for being on the show today.
You bet, Dave. Very good talking to you.
Yeah, I really appreciate the time that you took to be with us today. And thank you for watching the show. And I'm looking forward to see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.